Good day, ladies and gentlemen. It's Jeremiah here to welcome you back to Flashback Productions. Today, we have for you new revelations regarding the events before and during the Constitutional Convention. Now, without further ado, let's redirect you back in time to our very own Walter, who was in the 13 colonies with the up-to-minute updates.
Thank you, Jeremiah. It is currently September of 1786, and I am in western Massachusetts. It's pretty rural here, as you can tell. Currently, quite frankly, the United States and its government is in shambles. We've only been a nation for 10 years, and many wouldn't be surprised if we don't survive 10 more. But before we discuss the nation's current problems, it is important to consider our history and why we chose to declare independence in the first place. In 1763, Britain emerged from the French and Indian War, and they had depleted their budget. In fact, they were in debt. As a result, 2 years later, they passed the Stamp Act on the colonies, taxing them for many things.
What is this tax Britain has forced us to pay? The Stamp Act? This is complete nonsense. I can't even go out and buy a deck of cards or a newspaper without being taxed for Britain's debt.
Yes, we have no representation in the Parliament which imposes this tax. We have been taxed without our consent. We are Englishmen and this violates our liberties.
Obviously, the colonists were upset by the idea of taxation without representation, and so they took it upon themselves to fight for their rights. Well, let's just say matters got out of hand. And fast. After the colonists protested and harmed British tax collectors, England sent troops to Boston in 1768 in hopes that they would end the uprisings. However, it did no good. 2 years later, there was a monumental event on the streets of Boston. It was titled the Boston Massacre. A small group of redcoats were being barraged with rocks and snow by a growing mob of protesters. In the midst of the chaos, shots were fired. 5 colonists were killed and others wounded. As it turns out, Paul Revere depicted the events of that March night in the form of an engraving. However, his artwork was propaganda.
Obviously, this image outraged everyone in America. Because of this, the colonists became less tolerant of England's antics. As a result, when Parliament passed the latest series of taxes in 1773, Samuel Adams and the Sons of Liberty had had enough.
As you can see, the Sons of Liberty and other protesters have snuck onto British ships in Boston Harbor. That ship is carrying millions of dollars worth of tea, which will be sold to the colonists for normal pricing, with one catch. Britain has recently passed a tax on tea, and so these brave, patriotic men are making sure that nobody is deceived by England's antics. Sorry, British East India Company, but this tea is about to go for a swim. Yeah! After being informed about the Boston Tea Party, as it's since been called, British officials were furious. As a result, they put a blockade on Boston Harbor. This meant that no ships were allowed in or out of the harbor. A dramatic 2 years after that, the inevitable occurred. Shots were fired in Lexington and Concord. The fight for American independence had begun. A year later, our founding fathers composed and signed our Declaration of Independence. We were officially a free country. Sometime during the war, we also composed the Articles of Confederation, our first governmental system. However, immediately after the war ended, the Articles instantly began showing their flaws. But don't just take my word for it. Let's send you down to John Adams and James Madison. Hello everybody, James Madison here, alongside John Adams. The fact of the matter is, our current governmental system is failing miserably. Obviously, we understand that the purpose of American independence in the first place was to escape tyranny and oppression. The Articles of Confederation, however, do not give our Congress enough power. Almost all the governmental power is vested in state governments. Each state has its own currency, making trades between countries or even between states very difficult. This is having drastic negative impacts on our economy and its ability to grow.
The Articles of Confederation and their flaws were actually very, very impactful. It was our nation's first try at a government system. They had previously been ruled by England, which at the time was the biggest powerhouse in the world. But now, on their own, the Americans' opportunity to prove to the rest of the world that they could strive without Mother England. After other countries saw us struggling, many didn't believe we would survive. They thought we would implode. But in the end, our ability to persevere through the tough times really showed who we were as a country. Yes, thank you. The importance of Shays' rebellion was ultimately not that they weren't given fair compensation for their time and sacrifice. The importance was that the government was unable to stop Shays and his comrades. They were easily able to intrude upon governmental property with little resistance. This really showed the colonists that the government was unable and was simply not working under the Articles of Confederation, and that we needed to reform our nation.
Yes, thank you, Walter. As you can see, I'm at the site of this convention organized by James Madison in Annapolis. Unfortunately, only 12 delegates are in attendance, representing 5 different states. Let's go take a look at what they're discussing.
The fact of the matter is, our economy will fail. We are the United States of America, and as a confederation, we are hardly united at all. Trade barriers have been erected between states, making even basic trades difficult. This must change.
Yeah, and you saw what happened in the state of Massachusetts. A group of farmers were easily able to overtake courthouses and other properties. Our government is simply too weak under the Articles of Confederation. We need to do something about it. I have a proposal. We shall invite delegates from all 13 states to a convention in May in Philadelphia at Independence Hall. Our only hope is to unite and amend the Articles of Confederation.
Yeah,
All in favor, say aye!
Well, there you have it, folks. The delegates have planned a convention next spring. Until then, this is Ben signing off. Here's a break.
You know what's great about communism jokes?
What?
Everybody gets them. Feel like you shouldn't have to go to work to get what you deserve. Is your government not doing enough for you?
Oh my goodness, folks, I truly apologize. That was a very disturbing image, and it was not appropriate to be played when we're discussing the founding of our great nation. Anyways, along we go through time to May of 1787 in Philadelphia, where Ben is on the spot with up-to-the-minute updates.
Yeah, hello folks. I'm currently standing within Independence Hall, and all 55 expected delegates have arrived on the scene. However, there is one catch. Rhode Island has chosen to reject the invitation to the convention. They are in denial that the Articles of Confederation are in need of reform, and so they have no representation at this groundbreaking event. Among the delegates in Independence Hall are George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and Benjamin Franklin, so obviously some big names here.
George Washington has been unanimously elected the president of the event, so we will oversee that all proceedings here are productive and civilized. The delegates have also appointed Alexander Hamilton, Charles Pinckney, and George Wyatt to the Rules Committee of this event. Unfortunately for the media, they have already determined that this convention will be secret and away from the public until they have finished their work. However, after we offered them a small grant of $10 million, they have allowed Flashback Productions to stay inside of the Independence Hall during the convention. So stay tuned, folks. This is exclusive footage. Before I miss anything, let's head over to check out the action.
Folks, may we please have a moment of silence? Virginia, it seems like you have a proposal.
Yes, Mr. Washington, on behalf of myself, Mr. Edmund Randolph, and the state of Virginia, we would like to propose a plan.
Yes, the most integral part of our so-called Virginia plan is that we shall have a bicameral legislative branch. The two houses would be a Senate and a House of Representatives. Together, they would be referred to as the Federal Congress. The amount of representation each state has in each house will be determined solely on free population. This will ensure that each state is given a proportional amount of representation based on how many people they have. This means that the ratio between people and representatives will be perfectly even in each and every state.
Our proposed bicameral Congress will be called the legislative branch, which we propose to be one of our 3 new branches of government. Another branch, the executive branch, will consist of a president and the cabinet, the president's advisors. The third branch, the judicial branch, will be the Supreme Court. In other words, a group of judges to oversee that laws abide by the Constitution.
To ensure that no branch of our proposed government is able to overpower the others, we will develop a system of checks and balances. Essentially, the 3 branches of government will be inhibited by other branches while also being able to restrict the other branches. The judicial branch, for example, will be able to overturn laws passed by the legislature if the justices view them as in conflict with our new Constitution. However, both the executive and legislative branches have the power to appoint and approve judges onto the court.
The executive branch, meanwhile, is held in check because its members can be impeached by Congress, and the justices on the Supreme Court can't be fired by the president. However, the executive branch has the power to veto or overturn a law passed by Congress. In return, however, the legislative branch can overturn a president's veto through a 2/3 vote.
Thank you, Virginia. I would like to give you all a moment to analyze this plan. Very well. Are we ready to vote upon this so-called Virginia plan?
Unless anyone else has a proposal of their own, it seems logical that our plan be approved immediately.
Have patience, Delegate Madison. New Jersey, what do you have to say?
With all due respect, your petty plan is entirely unfair to the smaller states like my own. I would like to request that the voting on the Virginia plan be adjourned until we had time to amend it.
Well, I suppose so.
The delegates continued to debate about Madison and Randolph's plan for 2 weeks. During that time period, all the delegates agreed that our reformed government would consist of 3 branches. Finally, on June 15th, 1787, William Paterson and New Jersey decided to propose a plan of their own.
Oh yes, Delegate Patterson of New Jersey. What do you have to say?
We would like to propose a plan of our own, which just so happens to contradict with the Virginians' plan. Under our plan, the United States will have a unicameral Congress, just as we do now. This Congress will be just like it is under the Articles of Confederation. Each state will be given one vote so that each state is represented the exact same.
If you'd excuse me, Mr. Washington and Mr. Patterson, New Jersey's plan will simply never work. One of the reasons the Articles of Confederation failed was because the government was too weak and the larger states didn't have enough votes in Congress.
Yes, Delegate Hamilton. New Jersey, the amount of votes with your plan may be the exact same with each state, but in reality, that does not actually make it more fair. Some states have more people than others, so they deserve to have more representation.
Madison, Hamilton, you've heard enough of your argument. Myself, the state of Delaware, and all smaller states of this convention will not hesitate to withdraw from this event if we are not given the rights we deserve.
Oh my goodness. It is too probable that no plan we propose will be adopted. Perhaps another dreadful conflict is to be sustained. If, to please the people, we offer what we ourselves disapprove, how can we afterwards defend our work? Let us raise the standard to which the wise and honest can repair. This event is in the hand of God.
Have no fear, Mr. Washington. This plan is one no one can disagree with. Allow us to make a proposal of our own. Myself with the other Connecticut delegates believe our plan could be a great compromise between both of the plans.
New Jersey, you firmly believe in having the same amount of representation for each state. Virginia, you believe in proportional representation in Congress. To combine the two plans, we propose a bicameral Congress. To please small states like New Jersey and Delaware, each and every state will have 2 representatives in the Senate. However, the amount of representation each state has in the House of Representatives will be based on population.
Yes, it is a perfect combination of the two plans.
You must understand, we deserve equal votes in both houses. An equal vote in each state is essential to the federal idea and is founded in justice and freedom, not merely in policy.
Martin continued to talk for 3 hours, trying to promote the New Jersey plan. Afterwards, he stormed out of the convention when the delegates were evidently favoring the Great Connecticut Compromise.
There's no representation based on population at all. What will become of the slaves in the southern states? Will they count towards the population?
Of course, they do live in the states after all, and therefore they deserve to be considered as citizens.
What hypocrites! When we developed the Articles of Confederation, you argued that slaves were in fact property, and therefore we decided not to tax you for having slaves. But now, as soon as you hear that the population gives you more representation in Congress, you have reserved your perspective on the argument.
If this convention is intended to reform our nation, why don't we just abolish slavery altogether? The augmentation of slaves weakens the states, and such a trade is diabolical in itself and disgraceful to mankind.
No, George Mason, that's nonsense. Us Southerners will refuse to sign this new government document if slavery is abolished, and since we do have slaves, we deserve to have them count as population.
But perhaps a slave could be considered 3/5 of a free white citizen. This is a compromise to accommodate for the opinions of both the southern and northern states.
This is outrageous! We wrote in our Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal, and enslaving people violates their unalienable rights. What is wrong with you guys?
I know.
Well, Delegate Mason, perhaps we can include a year in our Constitution that designates when the slave trade must end by. This date will not signify the end of slavery itself, but it will prohibit Americans from acquiring new slaves from overseas.
Well, I've been listening to the latest series of arguments, and it seems that the Federalists have been arguing against the Anti-Federalists. The new governmental document is practically finished, but many Anti-Federalists claim they will not sign the Constitution. They claim it gives too much power to the central government, and it doesn't outline specific rights for the people. Let's go see what they're saying.
This new Constitution needs a list of rights to go along with it, or else we will be oppressed by the government.
The first words of the document are "we the people." This Constitution was written by people, so surely it guarantees rights to the people.
No! Remember what happened with England? Our rights were not listed on fine print, and England was able to use that as a way to take advantage of us.
Very well then. Now that our Constitution is complete, it is time to sign, if you all please.
As you can see, all the delegates, with the exception of Eldridge Gary, Edmund Randolph, and George Mason, are signing the new Constitution. But before the non-signers leave, let's go have a quick word with them.
Oh, Mr. Gary, do you have a moment?
Of course, I'm in no rush.
Why did you refuse to sign the Constitution?
Well, I'm exceedingly distressed at the proceedings of the convention being almost sure that they will lay the foundation of a civil war.
Ha, well, thank you, Mr. Gary. Come back in 75 years, and maybe you'll even be right.
What?
Oh, nothing. Carry on.
And that is all the drama leading up to and at the Constitutional Convention. Centuries after the convention, the document still lays the foundation for all law in the United States today. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Flashback Productions. For now, this is Walter, signing off.